I'm going to give a slightly more hopeful note than our last speaker. And I actually started fiddling around with my presentation throughout the day. So I apologize, we're going to go back and forth because everything that has been spoken about today has informed my practice. And I feel like I'm more of a practitioner of the research that we've heard. I'm trying to experiment and put all of that stuff into practice and see what happens. And so I'm going to share my most recent project of what happens when you integrate curiosity, empathy, all the research around forest bathing, all the things that you've heard today. What happens when you actually put that into practice? And I want to start. I decided I wanted to start with this frame because I am an art lover. I collect art. I go to dozens of art events a week when we're not in a pandemic, and I've often thought about this idea that art has this transformative effect on humans, and like I know that in my gut, and I think many of us in this room probably feel that too. But I've been feeling a little bit, not cynical, skeptical, but I've changed the way I've been thinking about art. Because art itself does nothing. It hangs on the wall. You go and you listen to it and you're like, oh my God, that was beautiful. But it doesn't actually do anything. It's the people that do the things. And I think we know that instinctually, but I think it's worth saying that at the end of the day, it's about the person making a connection. It's not the art that makes the connection. And I think I'm trying to change the way I speak about art in this way. And so I think that I know that I am very inspired currently by a professor of political science at the University of Michigan, where I'm doing a pretty large project, which is the one I'm going to tell you about any second now. But I'm really inspired by a paper that she has just written in which she believes that in order to create a more flourishing society, we have to reorient public policy away from the transactional toward the relational. And she has 4 pillars of a flourishing society. Community, which I think we understand what that means. Sustainability, dignity, which is a piece that I want to explore more in a different kind of conversation. And then the 4th piece is beauty. And by that she means art, humanities, our connection, the connections we make with each other relationally through the arts. And so I've been thinking a lot about how I want to create projects that are relational. It's not about the project happens to happen in a museum in my case. I've done projects in library spaces, but the underlying principle behind everything that I'm working on right now is around relational thinking. And so how do we apply relational thinking to the empathy building projects that we're all working on? And so, I don't know, it's not really about the art, it's about the relationships that we create through these mechanisms. Okay, so I'm going to give a very quick overview of how this particular piece of my project started. Right after the 2016 election, I was really upset about the result. And so my instinctual reaction was to invite Trump voters over to my house for dinner and talk to them. And so I made dinner. This is one of the later dinners. The first one was amazing. It was so great that I kept doing it over and over. Not as an art project, but just as a very personal experience of what the heck? I want to ask my own questions. And I was curious. And so I made, at the end of each dinner, I would make a blueberry and cherry crisp. Get it? And it would turn into a purple goo. Get it? And so that project, after a couple years, turned into a project called Looking for America, in which I organized large-scale conversations over a meal in museums and libraries across the country. I went as far as Anchorage, Alaska, to El Paso, Texas, Sioux City, Iowa, and I curated art experiences. It began as art exhibits, but then it led to art experiences that included poetry, music, dance, all the different modes of expression to help people not only express themselves, but to find ways to connect with one another through sort of kind of a subversive way. Instead of beginning with this triangulated way of connecting, before we connect face to face, because, we are face to face, excuse me, but the idea was to start laying a foundation for the relationship, because it's pretty hard for strangers to just get, sit down at a table and just start relating, having a relationship. So anyway, so that grew into a national project where I traveled around the country, but unfortunately the pandemic put an end to that. And so we have the project that I'm working on right now at the University of Michigan Art Museum is the first one we've done since the end of 2019. And the exciting thing about the University of Michigan Art Museum, which we call UMA, is that the director, Tina Olson, is a total visionary, and she's written a really great piece in Art News, which I'm happy to send to everyone, about how we can reorient what we think of a museum space is meant to be. And one of the things that she really cares about is turning it into a civic space. Civic in terms of not just having people engage in different ways, like a lot of museums are doing yoga or whatever, but she's actually agreed to have the museum turned into an actual voting site. So the local clerk's office has opened a voting registration and voting site in part of the museum, and the School of Art and Design at Michigan has designed the space in this really cool, beautiful way. They've laid it out in a way that's made it so easy to understand what to do, where to go. And these are first-time voters, most of them, because it's at a university campus. And so it's scary when your very first time to vote. So it's really cool. She's totally thinking differently about what the museum space can be. And by the way, she's going to be in town this week if anybody's interested. I was thinking about organizing a little happy hour with her on Saturday, if anyone's interested in that. What's that? I should make one. Yes, good idea. Okay, so anyway, so then she invited me to come to the museum as I'm their visiting artist this fall. And so my practice is called social practice art, socially engaged art. So I don't create things that hang on the wall, things that you might recognize as normal art pieces. My art installations or art works are relational. It's about bringing people into dialogue with each other, into relationship with each other. But you almost kind of have to trick people into it, because a lot of my work is around bringing people together across the political spectrum, and it's pretty hard. As our previous speaker said, many people don't actually want to talk to each other. And so how do we do that? And how do we use the museum as a venue for that? Because, as our previous speaker said, many people on the right are very leery of this space as a place to have this kind of open dialogue. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that, and I'm going to tell you why it is a perfect place for it. In the meantime, I've developed a series of conversations, or a series of activations that are happening in the museum. One happened 2 weeks ago. The next one is next week. And anyway, and so the idea is to create more and different and joyful exploration. I just stole that from our first speaker this morning. How do we have joyous exploration throughout the museum? Because that's really what people want. You can't invite a person into the museum and say, hey, we're going to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't vote like you. Nobody would come to that. I wouldn't even come to that. So that's what I mean by sort of tricking people into the space, is we're going to create joyous exploration in the museum space. I literally just added this slide while we were talking, because I was like, that is perfect. So 2 weeks ago, we had, the museum already has a regular series called Feel Good Friday. A lot of museums do this, as you probably know, where they keep the museum open a little later, and you can have fun in the museum. So I decided I wanted to do something a little more, how shall we say, wonky. I'm all for parties, bands, whatever, but I want it to be fun, but I also want people to actually think a little bit. And so what I did was I probably overdid it, to be honest. I was too ambitious, but we created a series of activations in the museum. And the other idea was to get people to go to all the parts of the museum. So I created multiple interactions throughout the museum. Each one paired an artist with a subject matter expert, climate, housing, transportation, and they created some kind of interactive thing together that was in a different part of the museum. And the main things that I asked for them to do was to, make it something fun, something interactive, and something that would require a little bit of dialogue and a little bit of reflection. And so this is what we came up with. In the main space, we set up a pairs of chairs, and that were like kind of fun. This does not do it justice. Like, it would look really cool. And we invited local candidates for city council and state house races to come. You could sit with one of them and follow and answer this prompt, tell a story, because we know that storytelling is an excellent way to connect people. But tell a story, and the politician was not allowed to speak except to ask questions. So all they could do was listen. And that's what they did. And at the end, the local political journalist for the local NPR station brought all the politicians on stage and asked them, like, how did that feel not to be able to talk? What did you learn about your constituents? Things like that. But it was like an amazing thing to see them not talking. And we were trying to like find little ways to, like, if they did talk, if they campaigned at you or some way, they were gonna like buzz a little buzzer. But we decided that was a little too aggressive. But anyway, so that was amazing. This is the housing installation. We had an artist named Deidre Smith, who goes by, I can't remember her name now. But anyway, she leads a workshop in writing hip hop lyrics based on topics, and then she would show them how to do it, and then they could do little mini performances of their lyrics. And so all the questions that people were writing lyrics in response to were around this, what does home mean? What would you do if you found yourself, unable to pay your rent, you had no money and you needed dental work, or questions that got people to think about, like, what does it mean to have a home and to be able to live, the way the rest of us live. Anyway, and so she's a hip hop artist who helped people write hip hop lyrics around housing policy. And then the expert was the local, the woman who's in charge of housing policy in Ann Arbor. This artist paired up with the voting clerk, and people would write down they would reflect and write their responses around who they would vote for, and not meaning what candidate, but like when you vote, like who in your life are you thinking about when you vote? Like who is affected by your vote? And they would write their response on these pieces of paper, and then he helped them fold those papers into an origami, the heart, crane, different kind of shapes. We were focusing on hearts because they were the easiest, and hearts. And then people were encouraged to take photographs of themselves in front of this installation. And so it just kept getting fuller and fuller throughout the night. They would hang their origami on the installation. So reflection, seeing your piece part of this whole, other art installation, because we know that making things together brings people together. This one was really cool. This expert she's a climate expert, and she paired up with this amazing man. He's an 83-year-old artist who is the ambassador in residence at the Heidelberg Project in Detroit. If you've heard of that, it's an amazing organic installation that's happened over many years. And he has photographs around nature, and so they led a whole conversation envisioning what Ann Arbor could look like from a climate, the best Ann Arbor could be from a climate perspective. And then there's research that says that envisioning a brighter future together is another way of getting people to feel more connected to one another. Oops, I went the wrong way. And then we had an artist drawing the conversations as they were happening, and then she integrated Hoshia's photographs into her drawings as well. So those obviously the photographic things are his photographs. Another artist, there was another installation around transportation policy. Like, who wants to talk about transportation policy? Well, you do if you join the Magic School Bus, the Magic Cool Bus. So we had a very a guy who's called Violin Monster. He's very well known in Ann Arbor, and he was busking in front of the bus station. We created a whole bus station and bus. it's hard to see. We did not get good pictures. But people were so engaged. So the idea was Violin Monster would draw people up there, and then Erica Briggs, the transportation expert in Ann Arbor, would lead people in a conversation. And it was weird to watch people just so engaged in conversation they wouldn't leave. It was really cool. And then the final installation was a campfire sing-along. This was just kind of fun. There was no like ulterior motive to this one in terms of learning about policy. It was more about this. I'd read this paper from the Greater Good Science Center from Berkeley, which you led me to, that says that when people sing together, they feel more connected to one another. It's pretty simple, but it works. And so we had a guy playing, typical campfire like country roads kind of songs, and handed out lyrics, and people just sang together. And we served s'mores. And so just a fun little way to kind of end the evening. Come and sing together. So that was Feel Good Friday from a couple weeks ago, and hundreds of people came. It was so cool, really fun. But the next thing that's coming up is one of my cross-political dinners. We're calling it, Hey, We Need to Talk. And we were trying to find fun ways to sort of make it feel like delightful when people arrive, because they know they're coming to a cross-political conversation, but we want to but I'm trying to like lighten the mood a little bit, because like people need to have fun with this. And so so one of the little gimmicky things that we're doing is we're going to give everybody a pair of 3D glasses, and then all the things like the little signs, you're not going to be able to read them unless you put on your little glasses. We do have the everything in normal type too, because even I'm like, I can't see this. But anyway, I'm excited when we get to take a picture of everybody with their little glasses on. So we're going to have, we're shooting for 100 people, 50 left-leaning people, 50 right-leaning people. And they're going to be led through a series of prompts that will get increasingly more intimate, but then open up to a more political conversation. So the idea is to establish the relationship first. And I've told people we are not talking about politics until I tell you can talk about politics. So establishing relationships first. And I'm very much inspired by, do you remember a few years ago, there was a Modern Love called 36 Questions to Falling in Love? Yeah. It's based on science. Dr., I think his name was Arthur Aaron, came up with 36 questions that you would ask each other to fall in love. So the whole, and each question, and the questions got increasingly more intimate. So that's sort of a little bit of what I kind of base these questions on. The questions are not necessarily directly from there, but the principle of it. Although the one interesting thing about the 36 questions was that then at the end you were supposed to stare into each other's eyes for 4 minutes, which of course, like that is just, like try that for like 10 seconds. It's very hard, as you know. So we're not going to do that piece of it. So this is an example of the first question, that when people arrive, they will be paired with a left-leaning person and a right-leaning person, and they'll be paired together, and they'll walk around the museum together, and they'll tell each other a story. And then they will take the information that they heard about their partner and introduce their partner at the dinner table. So again, so you have to listen very deeply, and then you have to be able to like have empathy in order to like recount what your partner told you. We seat people in groups of 6 to keep the conversations intimate, so that there's only one conversation going on at the same time. There's lots of little bits which I'm happy to tell you all about, but I don't have enough time to tell you everything. So happy to tell you all the little details of that. All of this work is based on intergroup contact theory, which you heard about earlier. Essentially, the basis is you get people in a room together who would not normally be in a room together, and they become less discriminatory. They start to see each other differently just from proximity. So a lot of research around that. Couple things from the political perspective. That it's there's social science that says that if you share information like what I'm about to tell you, It helps people to relax and to be more open to having a conversation with a politically opposed person. One is what they call the perception gap. Both of the studies that I'm about to cite are from a group called More in Common, but there's lots of research that I can share with you that just tells you why we just completely misunderstand each other. But essentially, the perception gap. We don't even know the truth about each other. Republicans think that 32% of Democrats are gay, but 6% report that they are gay. Democrats believe that 38% of Republicans make $250,000 a year. The reality is 2% do. There's other research about like how many people, what you think it means to be in the 1%. What do you think mean? What is the income level you think makes you in the 1%? Throw out a couple numbers.
150,000.
Oh,
10 million.
10 million?
1 million.
1 million?
Yeah. 250.
Yeah, 250. If you make 250 or more, you're in the 1%. I assumed it would be at least $1 million. At least. So anyway, we have wildly misperceptions about each other. This is my most exciting piece of news for everyone, and that is the exhausted majority. And I don't remember who, I think it was actually Susan who said this. It's the extreme voices left and right who are driving the conversation. And that when they drive the conversation, whatever they say, we assign all the people who are on that side to have that opinion. And that's obviously not true. It's so much more complicated. It's so much more nuanced than that. And so the More in Common people found that 86% of Americans are what they call the exhausted majority. They divide everybody up into 7 categories, and then what they're saying is the 5 that are not the extreme are the exhausted majority. When I first looked at this study in 2018, it was 77%. Now it's 86%. Like, we're becoming more and more irritated and annoyed about polarization. So this is who is coming to the dinners. It's not the extreme sides. Many people often ask me, let me go back, because many people often ask me, how do you get the other side to come to the dinner? Like, that's the first question people ask me, and it's really hard. When I put out this invitation, liberals love this stuff, but I spent a lot of time recruiting people from the right. Until I had this recent experience that gave me so much hope. So we were having a lot of trouble with Ann Arbor. I mean, you can't get much more blue than that. And so my colleague at the museum posted an invitation on Nextdoor. And several people were like, oh my God, they're setting a trap. So don't go. And I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Like, what are we going to do to you? But then this guy wrote this, and it's too long to read, but basically he was like, Philippa is a staunch Democrat. Then, who knows what her motives are, her progressive motives, whatever. So I told Jim, invite that guy to lunch for me. And he did. And when I went to Ann Arbor a couple weeks ago, I had lunch with this guy. And I mean, he is a Trump voting, loves Hannity, all the things. And I am not exaggerating, within 5 minutes, we were talking about art, philosophy, we were talking about all this stuff and totally having like amazing conversation. We were at lunch for almost 3 hours together. And at one point he goes, wait, aren't we going to talk about politics? I'm like, no, we're not going to talk about politics. Like, we're having a relationship here. And then at the end he said, well, I know you want something from me. So I was like, yes, I do. I need you to come to my dinner, and I need you to invite all your conservative friends. And he has been recruiting like crazy, and pretty much we almost have the 50 people that we need because of this guy. And so I know that he's an exception, like the statistics survey, but I also I'm very skeptical of those kinds of surveys because it doesn't capture feeling, and I don't know how to capture that. And so that I would love to talk to Susan more about, like, how do we capture this guy who I know he's exceptional, but not totally exceptional, because 86% of Americans are exhausted, and I am certain he's responsible for 40 people coming to this dinner, because before I talked to him, we had less than 10. So I don't know. So that is sort of my sort of moment of hope.
Find your guy in every place.
And I think I could if I think I could. So that is absolutely the goal for now. I should mention that Michigan is part of the Big Ten, and so the idea is to try to recreate this in other Big Ten schools, museums in Big Ten schools, and then maybe every campus museum in America could do something like this. And so this is the organization that I started after I started doing these things, these dinners during the Looking for America period, because I do believe curiosity connects us. And I know that our first speaker was a little bit, her research found that, maybe she was a little, it was a disheartening finding, except that I think there's more research to be done here. I think that we can actually turn those questions around to show that curiosity does actually connect us. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
This was
you're
amazing.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for being here in person.
I know,
Close
it's so nice to be, yes.
Yay,
it's so
proximity! Yes.
Thank you so much for that. That was really optimistic. Yeah. I'm interested to know, I feel like I identify as an introvert a little bit, and if I was to attend this, I'd want to know what to say and know what was going to be part of it. And I just don't know do you prepare anybody who's coming? Is this like a public invitation, or is the idea that whoever comes, and whatever happens, happens, and that's kind of the point of it?
Yeah, definitely more the latter. I prepare, it is completely open to the public. This time we had a little bit of an application process because we had too many liberal people. And so I would have, so you had to kind of write down where you stood. And so I was trying to pick people who I felt would fit well. And anybody who's conservative, basically they can come. But it is open to the world. We strive, there's that very hard line of 50 liberals, 50 conservatives. But I do strive to have age diversity, race diversity, economic diversity is really important. But it is hard for introverts. I get that. And so, for this dinner, actually, I thought about that, and we will have a sort of reflective writing moment. So I feel like that can kind of help introverts have a way to speak. But I also find that people, I hate to say magical, but I bet even you would.
I wouldn't have a story off the top of my head, but then I was like, I could probably figure it out. But
Oh, you do get one prompt in advance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you do have one thing that you can prepare for. Yes.
Yes. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. That was just so, like you said, optimistic and good to know. So what's the follow-up after the dinners?
Very good question. I should also mention that I am an annoyingly optimistic person to many people, so I apologize to those who are annoyed by that, but I don't know. So the follow-up, very important, and that's why, we were trying to think of multiple things to happen after, because as we know, that story about Derek Black is one I use a lot, the former white supremacist guy. It took a year of weekly dinners to get to the point where he would renounce his white supremacy. And so it does take that much, and it is a lot of work, and nothing it will change with this one conversation, one dinner in the museum. I know that. So we actually are applying for a huge grant to try to keep this, to find ways to keep it going, because it takes multiple interactions over a long period of time in order to work. But so I just see this as the beginning of the conversation. I've done this dinner in many places all over the place, and I rarely hear of anybody continuing it. Everybody's always excited at the end, oh my God, what can I do? And then nobody ever actually does anything. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it is incumbent on people like us to help provide opportunities to keep it going until it becomes habit for others, because it takes a long time to create a habit.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So how do you prepare people to navigate, if I was having dinner with a white supremacist, it would make me deeply uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
I would probably feel, nauseous and, Really, like, how do you prepare people for these potential triggers?
Well, I don't have to, because 86% of Americans are not white supremacists, and white supremacists are not interested in having this kind of dinner. Now, I'm not naive. Like, there is certainly a spectrum from white supremacy to somewhere in the middle. So I get that part. And so because we do lay ground rules in advance, and we do have light facilitation at each dinner, so each table will have a person who's been lightly facilitated. That's how we kind of maintain the conversation in a way that is more toward actually engaging in the sort of storytelling deeper way and not veering off into these kinds of conversations. Now, it's really hard. We did have an instance at the dinner in Detroit where a person of color felt uncomfortable, and so she did stand up. We had to have a whole side conversation about that. So so we are trying to think of ways to make sure that if there is that kind of moment, there is an outlet for that, so that it does not continue in those directions. Sidebar on that, though, just when things get political, but not in that offensive kind of way, because I've told people you can't talk about politics until I say so. We're toying around with different ideas, and one is like giving people like 3 tickets, and if you talk about politics or if you stray off of the rules of engagement, you have to give away one of your tickets. So anybody who has the more tickets you have at the end, the more chances you will have to win a big fabulous prize at the end. So just thinking about, remember those jars where if you swear you gotta like put in $1. So trying to like evoke ideas of things that you might be familiar with. So that's a side thing to what your question is, but trying to keep people in line, so to speak.
Thank you, Philippa, on describing these dinners. I'm curious, what opportunities do you present or opportunities have come out as far as taking action after these dinners and have you done any measurement to find out has any change happened in their mindsets or in what they do?
Yeah. Very good question, and one that really makes me very anxious. So when we did the dinners around the country, we did have surveys. So I do have metrics, whatever. But I kind of what I was saying earlier is like, it's very hard to measure anything after one dinner. Like, sure, people are, if every survey is like, that was amazing. But you're right, like what happened after that? My gut is nothing. I don't know what happened after that, but my gut is nothing happened after that. And also, you can't change anybody in one dinner. So the dinner isn't about persuasion. It's about forming the relationship, and not trying to bring people into the center or to your side. Just literally finding the existing commonality and then working from there. And there are existing commonalities. I know that for a fact. But so I don't know. That's a kind of a non-answer because we'll discuss.
We'll talk.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Hi, Philippa. I find your approach on the relational aspects really interesting. I wanted to ask you, over the years that you've been doing this, have you found that the tone or the content of the conversations has shifted? And do you see it more as a kind of function of the person's culture, so things like values and norms that are really deep? Or do you see it more as a function of things like which are topical policies or this type of differences in terms of the cross-political spectrum conversations?
Well, one of the reasons why I tell people to not talk about politics is because, let's face it, most people don't really understand the issues. Like, if you really dug deep and you were started asking deeper questions about policy, most people don't. They think they know, but they don't. And there is, again, science that says that people make all their decisions based on their emotions. They think they're being reasonable and rational. So I just take that off the table and just keep hammering in on the relational, because that's where we're going to make the change. Not people knowing this percentage of Americans do that or that percent. People don't even know that information. So I just take that off the table. Does that make, is that answering, or I feel like there's a little nuance that I have forgotten.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of thinking, well, you know, are these people all the same at the very kind of deeper kind of cultural levels?
Yeah.
Or are they more like, you know, more surface level gripes or differences that they feel between the left and the right?
Yeah. Well, you know, we're not all the same, but we are. There's a great book, I can't never remember what it's called, but it says that America is made up of 11 different cultures. And so, no, we're not all the same. Every part of the country I'd go to, like the issues, that the things that people cared about were very different. When I went to Alaska, people said that I'm an Alaskan first and then I'm an American, which I thought was so interesting. White people, not just, you know, like white people were saying that. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So anyway, so yes, we're all completely different in what we care about and what we value, like our hierarchy of values. On the other hand, we're all the same. Like we all have the same basic human need. And I always go back to why storytelling is at the fundamental basis of all this, of anything that I do, the relational and the storytelling, is that it's, I mean, sometimes I feel like such a cliche when I say this, but know thyself. And, you know, the Greeks had, you know, the ancient Greeks knew something. They said that you have to know yourself first before you can even go out into the world and make a change and make a difference. And so I think that's what the storytelling is about. It's about exploring who you are and who you are in relation to others. And that's why it makes a difference.
I guess I just want to one up you on the optimism. I mean, what you're doing is essential, even though, yes, it takes multiple contacts and, long-term conversations to make change. You are opening hearts, you're planting seeds from which so much can grow. That's what, and you are making art. That's what it does. I mean, it's like I would never write another play if I thought to change somebody's life, they'd have to come to the play over and over and over and over again. And you hope that the event you are creating has seeds of transformation in it. And I know what you do does. So.
Yeah, I like putting it as seeds for sure. Yeah.
I love that, right? Each seed has the potential of a whole tree and this cycle. This is wonderful. Any other comments or questions? Philippa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.